Inside the mansion lived 20-year-old Anna, a kind and quiet girl with a deeply reflective nature. Her mother's death had shattered her, leaving her lost and struggling to adjust in a home that no longer felt like her own. Once close to her mother, who had been her guide and source of strength, Anna now found herself adrift in her grief. Anna wasn't alone in her grief. Her father, John, had been equally devastated by the death of his wife. John was 60, a man who had worked hard to build a successful business and provide his family with a life of comfort and security. But when his wife passed away, something inside him broke. The grief weighed on him, making him feel older than his years. He had been a strong man, but now he seemed vulnerable, lonely, and desperate for the warmth that his wife had taken with her when she died. It wasn't long before John, in his loneliness, made a decision that shocked his family. He remarried. His new wife, Vanessa, was 35, a woman whose beauty and charm could easily deceive those who didn't look closely. She came from a poor background but had always known how to get what she wanted. Vanessa had spent her life using her looks and wit to lure wealthy men, seeking to rise above her humble origins. To the outside world, she appeared to be the perfect companion for an aging, wealthy widower. But beneath her charm, Vanessa was cunning and greedy. Always scheming for a better life, and now she had found it in John. Vanessa didn't love John. She never intended to. She saw him as a ticket to a life of luxury. To her, John was a means to an end, his wealth. She married him with one goal in mind, to inherit his fortune after his death. She believed it was only a matter of time. But until then, she played her role, making John believe she was his second chance at happiness. Anna, still mourning the loss of her mother, found herself caught in the middle of this new marriage. At first, she didn't know what to think of Vanessa. Part of her wanted to reject her, to feel anger at how quickly her father had moved on. But another part of Anna longed for peace. She was tired of sadness and conflict. And so, despite her unease, Anna accepted Vanessa into their family, hoping that in time, things might settle. Perhaps, she thought, Vanessa would bring some comfort to her father, even if it wasn't the same as what they had lost. But Anna's older brother, David, saw things differently. David was 25, and unlike his sister, he had no intention of accepting Vanessa. From the moment she entered their lives, David distrusted her. He had a sharp sense for people's motives, and everything about Vanessa screamed gold digger to him. He knew her type. He had heard stories of women like her, using their beauty to trap wealthy men. David loved his family deeply, and he couldn't stand to see his father taken advantage of in such a way. David's resentment toward Vanessa grew with each passing day. He couldn't understand how his father, who had once been so sharp and discerning, could be so easily fooled by a woman like her. But he also knew that confronting his father would only create more tension, so David turned his frustration toward Vanessa. He watched her every move. Convinced that she was only waiting for the right moment to strike, to take what didn't belong to her, the tension in the mansion thickened as time passed. The once warm, loving home was now filled with coldness and suspicion. Vanessa, sensing David's hostility, played her part perfectly. She was sweet and gentle to John, always knowing how to make him feel needed and adored. But when John wasn't around, her true colors would show, her sly remarks, her subtle manipulations, and the way she flaunted her new lifestyle made David despise her even more. As for Anna, she felt caught between two worlds. She could see the strain between her brother and stepmother, but she couldn't bring herself to hate Vanessa, even though something about her felt wrong. Anna missed her mother terribly and sometimes wished things could go back to how they were. But that was impossible. Her father had made his choice, and for now, Anna chose to stay quiet, trying to keep the peace in a home that was slowly unraveling. Meanwhile, John remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within his family. He believed that his new marriage had given him a fresh start, a chance to heal from his grief and loneliness. But deep down, even he could sense that something was amiss. His children had grown distant, and the warmth he had hoped Vanessa would bring had yet to truly fill the empty spaces in his heart. Yet, John clung to the hope that with time, everything would get better. The mansion, once filled with laughter and love, now stood as a silent witness to the growing divide within the family. The walls seemed to echo with the unspoken tension, the buried anger, and the festering distrust. It was only a matter of time before everything would come crashing down, but for now, the family continued to live in their fractured state, each member carrying their own secret burdens. And so, the stage was set for the tragedy that would soon unfold, as days turned into weeks. The family settled into an uneasy routine with Vanessa now firmly part of their lives. From the outside, it seemed like a normal household. John, the devoted husband, trying to move on from his past grief, Vanessa, the elegant new wife, adjusting to her role, and Anna and David, the children, living with their father's decision. But beneath the surface, the family was far from united. The presence of Vanessa brought a shift in the house that no one could ignore. Vanessa quickly made her presence felt in the mansion. She began making changes, redecorating rooms, and adding her own touch to everything. She wanted the house to reflect her influence, showing that she wasn't just some temporary addition, but the new mistress of the estate. John, still under her charm, allowed her to do as she pleased. He admired her energy and taste, telling himself that this was what the house needed, a fresh start. Just like him, Vanessa knew how to keep John wrapped around her finger. She made sure to pamper him with affection, always saying the right things to keep him happy. She cooked his favorite meals, laughed at his old jokes, and made him feel young again. John, desperate to believe he had found love again, was blind to the manipulation. He ignored the whispers in town about Vanessa's past, brushing them off as nothing more than gossip. However, as time went on, Vanessa's real priorities began to show. She would subtly ask about his will, making comments about the future and inheritance. She made sure John felt guilty about his children, especially David, saying they didn't respect her. She played on John's emotions, driving a wedge between him and his children, all the while positioning herself as the most important person in his life. While John remained blinded by his affection for Vanessa, David's resentment only grew stronger. He couldn't stand the changes in the house. Everywhere he looked, it was clear that Vanessa was taking over. The furniture was different, the decor didn't feel like home anymore, and even the atmosphere felt colder. The house, once filled with warmth and memories of their mother, now felt like Vanessa's domain. David refused to hide his feelings. He openly clashed with Vanessa, and their arguments became a regular occurrence. He would accuse her of manipulating his father, of being in it only for the money. Vanessa, always quick on her feet, would calmly deny everything, acting hurt by David's accusations. This only fueled David's frustration. He couldn't understand why his father was so blind to the obvious truth. John, caught between his son and his new wife, tried to avoid the conflict. He would tell David to calm down, to give Vanessa a chance, but these words only made David angrier. To him, his father was no longer the strong, decisive man he once knew. Instead, he saw a man weakened by grief and blinded by a woman's manipulations. David's love for his father remained, but his respect for him was quickly fading. Anna, meanwhile, found herself caught in the middle. Unlike her brother, Anna didn't openly confront Vanessa. She was a naturally quiet and gentle person, and she wanted to believe that her father's new wife could bring some stability to their broken family. But deep down, Anna couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa's intentions weren't pure. Despite her doubts, Anna kept her distance from the conflict. She didn't like the constant fighting between her brother and stepmother, and she wished things could somehow be peaceful. Anna was still grieving her mother, and the last thing she wanted was more tension in the house. She wanted to protect her father, but she didn't know how. She feared that if she took sides, it would only make things worse. Anna also noticed something that troubled her. Vanessa was being unusually kind to her college friend, Mark. Mark had been a close friend of Anna's for years, and recently, their friendship had blossomed into something more. Mark often visited the mansion, and Vanessa would always go out of her way to be charming around him. While Vanessa treated Anna with a polite distance, she seemed to be especially attentive to Mark, making him feel welcomed and at ease. At first, Anna brushed it off as Vanessa being friendly, but something about the way Vanessa interacted with Mark felt uncomfortable. Vanessa's charm, however, was not what it seemed. Beneath her friendly facade was a woman growing increasingly dissatisfied. John's wealth had been enough to marry him, but now, Vanessa found herself bored and unfulfilled. John, much older and more tired, couldn't give her the excitement or passion she craved. Though she had married him for security, she longed for more, both in terms of money and in her personal life. Behind closed doors, Vanessa began to flirt with younger men. She was careful to keep it hidden, knowing that if John ever found out, it could ruin her plans. But her flirtations were no secret to David. He had seen her interactions with younger men and knew what kind of person she truly was. To David, this was further proof that Vanessa was nothing more than a manipulative woman using his father for her own gain. David wasn't alone in his suspicions. The wealthy men in town who had once been charmed by Vanessa now despised her. She had used them, taken their money, and left them humiliated. They wanted revenge, and some of them even began to spread rumors, hoping to tarnish her reputation. But Vanessa was skilled at navigating these social traps. She continued to play the role of the dutiful wife, all the while pursuing her own selfish desires. As the days passed, the cracks in the family grew deeper. John remained blissfully ignorant, clinging to the illusion that his new marriage would bring him happiness. David, on the other hand, couldn't contain his anger and frustration. He hated Vanessa for what she was doing to their family, and he hated that his father refused to see it. The constant tension between them left David feeling isolated, and he began distancing himself from his father. Anna, feeling the strain as well, withdrew even further. She tried to maintain a relationship with her father, but the growing hostility between David and Vanessa made it difficult. The mansion, once filled with love and laughter, had now become a house of secrets and suspicions. Each member of the family carried their own burden, and the sense of unease only grew stronger with each passing day. No one knew it at the time, but the family was heading toward a breaking point. The tension, the secrets, and the lies were all building up to something no one could predict. The mansion, already a place of growing tension, was about to become the setting for an even darker secret. As Vanessa's presence continued to strain the family, she found herself drawn to a dangerous game, one that would shatter what little peace remained. While her marriage to John gave her the wealth and status she had always wanted, it didn't fulfill her desires. Her husband's age and declining health left Vanessa craving excitement, both physically and emotionally. That excitement would come from an unexpected source. Mark, Anna's college friend and love interest. Mark was a frequent visitor to the mansion. As Anna's close friend, and now her romantic partner, he often spent time with her, offering comfort and companionship as she navigated the difficult situation with her family. Mark was from a middle-class background, humble and kind, and his presence in Anna's life had always been a source of happiness for her. But as time went on, something began to shift. Vanessa, with her sharp instincts, noticed Mark almost immediately. He was young, attractive, and easy to manipulate. What began as innocent conversation between Vanessa and Mark quickly turned into subtle flirtation. Vanessa, always charming and clever, knew how to make herself seem irresistible. She would compliment him, laugh at his jokes, and find reasons to spend time alone with him when he visited the mansion. Mark, at first, didn't see it for what it was. He believed Vanessa was just being friendly, trying to fit into the family and make Anna happy. But Vanessa's attention became more intense. She began to touch him casually, her hand brushing his arm or shoulder, her gaze lingering just a bit too long. Mark felt flattered by the attention of an older, attractive woman. And as Vanessa continued to charm him, Mark found himself drawn into her web, not fully understanding the consequences of what was happening. Anna, deeply in love with Mark, didn't notice the affair at first. She trusted him completely and was grateful for his presence in her life. In fact, Anna often felt relieved when Vanessa seemed to treat Mark well, as it helped ease some of the tension in the household. To Anna, Mark was a lifeline, someone who understood her and supported her during such a difficult time, but gradually, Anna began to notice small things that made her uneasy. Vanessa's constant attention toward Mark felt strange, but Anna tried to push her doubts aside, telling herself that Vanessa was just being friendly. After all, Vanessa was her stepmother, and Anna had done her best to accept her, despite everything. She didn't want to believe that something so awful could be happening right under her nose. However, as the days went by, Anna couldn't ignore the signs any longer. She would catch Vanessa looking at Mark in ways that seemed far too intimate for a stepmother. Sometimes, Vanessa would stand too close to him, her voice taking on a flirtatious tone. Anna's instincts told her something wasn't right, but every time she brought it up with Mark, he reassured her that she was overthinking things. He told her Vanessa was just being friendly and that there was nothing to worry about. But Anna's heart told her otherwise. The doubts gnawed at her, and soon, her once strong trust in Mark began to crack. While Anna struggled with her suspicions, the affair between Vanessa and Mark continued to deepen. Vanessa, always in control, made sure that their meetings remained secret. She was careful to never let John or Anna see anything out of the ordinary, playing the perfect wife and stepmother when they were around. But when they were alone, Vanessa would lure Mark into her world, playing on his emotions and desires. Mark, though guilty and conflicted, found it hard to resist Vanessa's advances. He knew he loved Anna, but Vanessa's seduction was powerful. She knew how to make him feel desired. And the thrill of their forbidden relationship only added to the temptation. What had started as harmless flirtation had now grown into a full-fledged affair, and both Mark and Vanessa were trapped in a dangerous cycle of deceit. Vanessa, always calculating, made sure to keep the affair hidden from John, who remained completely oblivious to what was happening under his own roof. He continued to trust his wife, believing she was loyal and devoted to him. John's health was declining, and he relied on Vanessa for emotional support. He had no reason to suspect that the woman he had married was betraying him in the worst possible way. Meanwhile, Anna's growing suspicion drove a wedge between her and Mark. She noticed how distracted he seemed, how his attention had shifted. He was no longer as affectionate as he used to be, and their conversations felt hollow, as if he was hiding something. Anna's heart ached with the possibility that Mark, the man she loved so deeply, might be betraying her. The turning point came one evening when Anna stumbled upon the truth in the most devastating way. She had been feeling restless, her mind consumed by doubt and worry. Late at night, unable to sleep, she wandered through the mansion, her steps slow and unsure. That's when she heard voices, soft, murmuring voices coming from one of the rooms. Curiosity mixed with fear, and Anna crept closer, her heart pounding in her chest. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, she saw them, Vanessa and Mark, locked in an intimate embrace. The sight of them together, so close, shattered Anna's world. Her worst fears had come true. Anna's breath caught in her throat, her mind spinning with disbelief and anger. She felt as though the ground had fallen out from beneath her. She had trusted Mark, loved him with everything she had, and now he was with Vanessa, the woman she had tried so hard to accept. In that moment, everything changed for Anna. She quietly backed away, unseen by the two inside the room. But the damage was done. The betrayal cut deep, and Anna's grief turned into something darker, a rage that simmered just below the surface. In the days that followed, Anna was a different person. She became withdrawn, haunted by the image of Mark and Vanessa together. She couldn't bring herself to confront them, not yet. Her heart was too broken, and the anger inside her was growing. Anna's trust had been shattered. Not only in Mark but in everything she thought she knew about her family. She felt trapped by the loss of her mother, the strained relationship with her father, and now this betrayal by the two people she thought she could trust. Anna struggled with her emotions, unsure of what to do next. Her love for Mark was still there, but it was tainted by his betrayal. Her acceptance of Vanessa had turned into bitter resentment. Anna's pain and anger would soon drive her to a decision that would change the course of the family forever. After Anna's heartbreaking discovery of the affair between her stepmother Vanessa and her boyfriend Mark, the tension within the mansion intensified. The air was thick with unspoken anger, betrayal, and suspicion. Everyone in the house was now walking on thin ice, each carrying their own burdens and secrets. Anna, torn apart by the betrayal, struggled to maintain her composure, while Vanessa and Mark, though discreet, couldn't completely hide their guilt. The situation was fragile, and it was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. Anna's world had been turned upside down. She felt suffocated by her emotions, anger, grief, and confusion all swirled together. She couldn't look at Mark or Vanessa without feeling the sting of betrayal. Her once bright and hopeful demeanor darkened. Though she kept quiet about what she had witnessed, her behavior changed drastically. She became more distant from everyone, especially Mark. When Mark tried to reach out to her, sensing something was wrong, Anna would brush him off, her responses cold and detached. She avoided being alone with him, fearing that if they talked, she might lose control and confront him about what she had seen. She wasn't ready for that yet. The pain was too fresh, and she needed time to process the depth of the betrayal. Her relationship with Vanessa, which had always been somewhat strained, became unbearable. Vanessa acted as though nothing had changed, continuing to play the role of the kind stepmother, but Anna now saw through her charm. Every smile, every kind word from Vanessa felt like a lie. The rage inside Anna grew stronger each day, but she held it in, unsure of how to release the overwhelming emotions building within her. Mark, meanwhile, found himself trapped in a web of guilt and confusion. His affair with Vanessa had started as something he hadn't planned, and though he was ashamed of what he was doing, he couldn't pull away from her. Vanessa had a powerful hold over him, making him feel desired and important in a way that he hadn't felt before. But his feelings for Anna were real, and he hated himself for betraying her. Mark sensed that Anna was drifting away from him. She was colder, more distant, and he didn't know why. He couldn't shake the feeling that she knew something, but he didn't have the courage to ask her directly. Instead, he tried to act normal, visiting the mansion as he always did. But the guilt weighed heavily on him. Every time he saw Anna, it was a painful reminder of what he was doing behind her back. He tried to end the affair with Vanessa several times, but she was relentless. She knew how to manipulate him, making him feel like she was the only one who truly understood him. Mark, caught between his loyalty to Anna and his illicit attraction to Vanessa, felt torn apart. He knew he was making a mistake, but he couldn't find a way out. Vanessa, on the other hand, was fully aware of the tension building around her, and she thrived on it. She had always been in control of the situation, and she believed she could manage everything to her advantage. To her, the affair with Mark was just another game, one that gave her excitement and kept her entertained in her otherwise dull marriage. She knew that Anna was suspicious, but she wasn't concerned. Vanessa believed that Anna was too weak and too afraid to confront her directly. As long as John remained oblivious, Vanessa felt secure in her position. She continued her flirtations with Mark, drawing him deeper into her grasp. She had no real emotional attachment to him, but his youth and attention fulfilled her need for excitement. John, meanwhile, was as unaware as ever. His health was declining, and he was more dependent on Vanessa for emotional and physical support. Vanessa played her part perfectly, making sure that John never doubted her loyalty. She would cook for him, care for him, and reassure him that she was there for him, while all the while indulging in her secret affair with Mark. While the tension between Anna, Mark, and Vanessa continued to rise, David's hatred for Vanessa reached new heights. He had never liked her, seeing her from the start as a manipulative gold digger. But now, he had begun to suspect that Vanessa's behavior went beyond mere manipulation. He believed she was having an affair. He hadn't caught her in the act, but he had seen enough to know something wasn't right. David noticed the way Vanessa would act around certain younger men, including Mark. Her flirtatious behavior was obvious to him, and it disgusted him. He couldn't understand why his father couldn't see it, why John continued to defend her despite all the signs that Vanessa was not to be trusted. David's resentment toward his father also grew, as he watched the man he once respected being manipulated by a woman so clearly driven by greed and lust. David's hatred for Vanessa became all-consuming. He wanted her out of their lives, and he was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. He often argued with his father, telling him that Vanessa was untrustworthy, but John dismissed his concerns, insisting that David was just being paranoid. This only fueled David's anger, and he began to plot ways to expose Vanessa and get her out of the family for good. The mansion, once a home filled with memories of love and family, had become a place of secrecy, lies, and growing animosity. Every member of the household carried their own weight of guilt, suspicion, and anger. Anna, battling her heartbreak, could hardly stand to be around Mark or Vanessa. David, consumed with his hatred, watched Vanessa's every move, determined to catch her in a mistake. And Vanessa, feeling secure in her manipulation, continued her affair with Mark, believing she could control the situation as long as she remained careful. John, oblivious to the turmoil around him, continued to live in the fantasy that his second marriage had brought peace to his life. He was blind to the reality that his family was crumbling under the weight of secrets and lies. Each day the tension in the house grew thicker, with no one knowing when, or how, it would finally break. Everyone was on edge, and it felt as though something terrible was bound to happen. The calm before the storm was almost unbearable. The tension in the mansion reached a breaking point, leading to the inevitable tragedy that no one had foreseen, though everyone had felt looming. Vanessa's control over Mark, Anna's festering heartbreak, and David's escalating hatred were like volatile ingredients, ready to explode. And explode they did. When Vanessa was found dead, it all happened suddenly. One morning, the household awoke to chaos. Vanessa was discovered dead in her bedroom, lying still on her bed, her body cold. At first glance, it appeared as if she had suffered a heart attack. But as the shock wore off and the reality of the situation began to sink in, questions arose. Vanessa had always been healthy and full of energy, showing no signs of illness. John, already frail and emotionally dependent on his wife, was devastated. His grief consumed him, but behind the mourning faces in the household, there was a deeper, darker atmosphere. The tension, once simmering, had now boiled over. The sudden death seemed too convenient, too timely. Whispers of foul play began circulating as soon as the shock subsided. The authorities were called, and an investigation was quickly launched. The news of Vanessa's death spread beyond the household, reaching the wealthy men she had manipulated in the past. Many of them had long wished for her downfall. It seemed that nearly everyone connected to her had a motive. As the investigation proceeded, it became clear that this was no simple death. It was murder. Vanessa's life had been filled with enemies, and as the investigation into her death progressed, several suspects emerged. Each one had a clear motive for wanting her gone, making the case a complex puzzle for the authorities to solve. David was a prime suspect. His hatred for Vanessa was no secret. He had openly despised her from the moment she entered their lives, calling her a gold digger and constantly trying to convince his father to leave her. He had even gone as far as to threaten her during arguments, telling her that she would pay for what she was doing to his family. David's anger had been building for years, and now Vanessa was dead, right when he seemed most desperate to get rid of her. The wealthy men from Vanessa's past were also suspects. Many of them had suffered financial losses due to her manipulations, and some had publicly expressed their disdain for her. Vanessa had made a lot of enemies through her calculated flirtations, and any one of them could have sought revenge. They had the money, resources, and motive to arrange her death, and they loomed as shadowy figures in the investigation. John, Vanessa's 60-year-old husband, also came under scrutiny. Though he had married her for companionship and trusted her, the possibility that he had learned of her infidelities was explored. John had recently discovered that Vanessa might have been using him for his wealth. He had once confided in friends that he didn't know if he could live with her betrayal. Though frail, his grief at her death didn't exclude him from suspicion. Did John want to be free of her, without the financial burden of a divorce? As the police investigated, the house became even more charged with suspicion. No one was safe from scrutiny, and old grudges and secrets began to surface. But it was Anna who surprised everyone the most. As the investigation dragged on, uncovering secrets and leading to dead ends, the police finally made a breakthrough. A small but significant piece of evidence was found, an empty vial of poison, hidden away in the house. This discovery changed the entire direction of the case. The poison had been slipped into Vanessa's nightly glass of milk, mimicking the symptoms of a heart attack and making the murder appear natural at first glance. When this evidence came to light, Anna, who had been quietly mourning and keeping to herself, did something no one expected. She walked into the police station and confessed to the murder. Her confession shocked everyone, from her family to the investigators. Anna, the gentle, quiet daughter who had seemed to accept Vanessa despite her flaws, admitted that she had been the one to kill her stepmother. The weight of her confession left the investigators in disbelief. When the police questioned Anna about her reasons for killing Vanessa, her heartbreaking story unfolded. She revealed the depth of the betrayal she had suffered at the hands of both Vanessa and Mark. After catching them in the act, Anna had been devastated. Her love for Mark, the one person she thought she could trust, had been destroyed by his affair with her stepmother. But it wasn't just the affair that pushed her over the edge. It was the constant lies, the manipulation, and the humiliation of seeing them together, right under her nose, while pretending everything was fine. Anna explained that her love for Mark was so deep that she couldn't confront him directly. She couldn't bear to lose him, even after knowing the truth. She feared that if she exposed the affair, she would not only lose Mark but also be consumed by the chaos it would cause. So, instead, she focused all of her anger and hurt on Vanessa. In a moment of desperation, Anna had planned the murder. She couldn't stand the thought of Vanessa continuing her manipulations, ruining her family, and tainting her relationship with Mark. So, one night, when Vanessa asked for her usual glass of milk before bed, Anna laced it with poison. It was quick and silent, and the next morning, Vanessa was dead. Anna's confession left everyone stunned. She had been suffering in silence, caught between her love for Mark and the betrayal of the two people she thought she could trust. Anna's confession brought the investigation to a close, but the fallout from Vanessa's death continued to haunt the family. John, heartbroken by both the loss of his wife and the revelation of his daughter's actions, retreated into himself, his health worsening by the day. David, though relieved that Vanessa was gone, couldn't help but feel the weight of guilt for not having protected his sister better. He had known something was wrong, but he had never imagined Anna would take such drastic measures. As for Mark, the truth shattered him. He had been blind to the damage he had caused, and Anna's confession left him feeling responsible for the entire tragedy. The affair with Vanessa, which he had thought was just a secret fling, had led to devastating consequences. He could no longer look at Anna the same way, knowing that his betrayal had driven her to murder. Anna was arrested and charged with murder, her once bright future now destroyed by the weight of her actions. She had acted out of love and desperation, but in the end, she had lost everything. The mansion, once a place of wealth and privilege, had become a symbol of heartbreak and betrayal. The family that had lived within its walls was torn apart, leaving only the echoes of their tragedy behind. With Anna's confession and Vanessa's murder revealed, the web of secrets that had entangled the family began to unravel. What had once been a household trying to hold on to some sense of normalcy now completely crumbled, leaving everyone emotionally fractured and broken. After confessing to poisoning Vanessa, Anna was immediately arrested. The weight of her actions now pressed down on her in a way she hadn't fully anticipated. What started as a desperate attempt to free herself from the unbearable emotional pain had led to a point of no return. She was escorted out of the mansion in handcuffs, her head hanging low, and her family left behind in utter shock. Inside, Anna was torn between feelings of relief and overwhelming sorrow. On one hand, the burden of her secret was no longer weighing her down. But on the other, she was fully aware that she had destroyed not only Vanessa's life but also her own future. She knew her actions would haunt her forever, no matter the punishment she faced. John, now an old man who had already endured so much loss, was left devastated by the dual shock of Vanessa's murder and his daughter's involvement. He had married Vanessa in hopes of regaining a sense of companionship in his later years, only to find out she had betrayed him. Worse still, his beloved daughter had been the one to take Vanessa's life. His health, already fragile, took a dramatic downturn after the tragedy. Physically and emotionally broken, John withdrew into himself. The man who had once been a figure of power and wealth in his family now became a shadow of his former self. He blamed himself for everything that had happened, wondering how he had missed the warning signs, how he hadn't seen through Vanessa or noticed Anna's pain. His guilt consumed him, and soon, he became bedridden, relying on round-the-clock care. In his mind, he replayed the last few years of his life, unable to make sense of how everything had gone so wrong. David, always suspicious of Vanessa and vocal about his hatred for her, had thought her removal from their lives would be a relief. But the way it had happened, with his sister committing murder, left him filled with anger and regret. He had never liked Vanessa, and part of him had believed she would eventually expose herself for what she was, a manipulative gold digger. But her death, especially at the hands of Anna, was not the way he had wanted her to leave. David's anger was twofold. He despised Vanessa for corrupting their family, for ruining the peace that had once existed. But more than that, he was angry at himself for not doing more to protect Anna. He had sensed something was wrong with her, especially in the months leading up to the murder, but he had been so focused on his own hatred for Vanessa that he missed the signs of Anna's inner turmoil. Now, with his father's health deteriorating and his sister in police custody, David was left as the last standing member of the once proud family. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. He had to manage the family's affairs, take care of his ailing father, and somehow process the emotional chaos that had turned his life upside down. For Mark, the unraveling of the affair and the murder shattered him in ways he had never expected. What had begun as a secret, forbidden relationship with Vanessa had spiraled into a nightmare. The realization that his infidelity had contributed to Vanessa's death was something he could hardly bear. He couldn't escape the guilt. Knowing that his betrayal of Anna had played a direct role in her emotional breakdown and eventual decision to murder Vanessa, in the weeks following the revelation, Mark disappeared from Anna's life. He couldn't face her, not after knowing what his actions had led her to do. He distanced himself from everything, retreating into isolation, ashamed and broken by the weight of his choices. The guilt gnawed at him, and though he was free from legal consequences, his conscience was anything but clear. He couldn't forgive himself for the part he played in the tragedy. The news of Vanessa's murder and Anna's arrest spread quickly through the small town. What had once been gossip about the wealthy family's internal struggles now became a full-blown scandal. People whispered about the family, shocked that a murder had taken place within the mansion's walls. Anna, once seen as the sweet, innocent daughter of a successful businessman, was now the center of a dark and tragic tale. Some pitied her, understanding the immense emotional pressure she had been under. Others condemned her actions, seeing her as nothing more than a murderer. The family's reputation, once respected and admired, was now tarnished beyond repair. Friends distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. The mansion itself became a symbol of tragedy, where wealth and privilege had been eroded by secrets, betrayal, and death. As Anna awaited her trial, the full reality of her situation became clear. The evidence against her was undeniable, and her own confession had sealed her fate. But despite the clear legal consequences she faced, the emotional toll was far greater. She had loved Mark deeply, and her decision to kill Vanessa had been driven by that love. But now, standing on the other side of her actions, she realized how much she had lost. During the trial, Anna's lawyer tried to paint a picture of a young woman pushed to the edge by betrayal and heartbreak. They argued that her actions were those of someone in deep emotional distress, and that she had acted impulsively, without fully understanding the consequences. But the facts were clear: she had poisoned Vanessa with premeditated intent. The jury listened intently, but the outcome seemed inevitable. Anna's sentencing was the final chapter of her story. She was given a lengthy prison sentence. Her future now one of confinement and reflection. As she sat in her cell, she often thought about her family, her father, who had been so blinded by Vanessa's charm, and her brother, who had always tried to protect her. But most of all, she thought about Mark, the man she had loved so much that she was willing to commit murder for him. With Anna in prison, John bedridden, and David left to pick up the pieces, the once bustling mansion fell silent. It had become a place of sorrow and memories, where the echoes of the past seemed to linger in every room. What had once been a grand home, filled with life and promise, was now a somber reminder of how everything had gone wrong. David remained in the house, trying to manage the family estate and care for his father in his final days. But the silence was oppressive, and the memories of the tragic events haunted him. Each room reminded him of the family they once were, and of the betrayal, murder, and heartbreak that had torn them apart. As time passed, the mansion became more isolated. The family's story fading from the town's gossip but never truly forgotten. It stood as a monument to a family broken by secrets, where wealth couldn't shield them from the darkness that had taken root within their hearts. In the end, the unraveling had been inevitable, but the pain it left behind would last a lifetime. As the dust from the tragedy began to settle, a darker truth emerged that no one had been prepared for, a revelation that would expose hidden layers of betrayal and deceit, leaving the family's already fragile foundation in ruins. The truth about Vanessa's murder was far more complex than anyone had imagined. After Anna's sentencing, David and the remaining family members tried to put their lives back together. Yet, even as the public attention faded and the mansion quieted, something continued to feel off. There was a lingering unease, as though the full story had yet to surface. While sorting through Vanessa's belongings one day, David discovered something that shook him to his core. In the back of her closet, hidden away in a small box, were letters, receipts, and photographs, evidence that pointed to a far deeper involvement between Vanessa and Anna's boyfriend, Mark. With Anna in prison, John bedridden, and David left to pick up the pieces, the once bustling mansion fell silent. It had become a place of sorrow and memories, where the echoes of the past seemed to linger in every room. What had once been a grand home, filled with life and promise, was now a somber reminder of how everything had gone wrong. David remained in the house, trying to manage the family estate and care for his father in his final days. But the silence was oppressive, and the memories of the tragic events haunted him. Each room reminded him of the family they once were, and of the betrayal, murder, and heartbreak that had torn them apart. As time passed, the mansion became more isolated. The family's story fading from the town's gossip but never truly forgotten. It stood as a monument to a family broken by secrets, where wealth couldn't shield them from the darkness that had taken root within their hearts. In the end, the unraveling had been inevitable, but the pain it left behind would last a lifetime. As the dust from the tragedy began to settle, a darker truth emerged that no one had been prepared for, a revelation that would expose hidden layers of betrayal and deceit, leaving the family's already fragile foundation in ruins. The truth about Vanessa's murder was far more complex than anyone had imagined. After Anna's sentencing, David and the remaining family members tried to put their lives back together. Yet, even as the public attention faded and the mansion quieted, something continued to feel off. There was a lingering unease, as though the full story had yet to surface. While sorting through Vanessa's belongings one day, David discovered something that shook him to his core. In the back of her closet, hidden away in a small box, were letters, receipts, and photographs, evidence that pointed to a far deeper involvement between Vanessa and Anna's boyfriend, Mark. These weren't just hints of a brief affair, they were proof of a calculated, long-standing relationship between the two, one that predated Vanessa's marriage to John. The photographs showed Mark and Vanessa together in various places, sometimes intimately, and the letters detailed their plans to use John's wealth for their own gain. Vanessa had manipulated John into marrying her, and Mark had been fully aware of it from the start. In fact, he had encouraged it, hoping that once John passed away, they could inherit the wealth together. For David, this revelation was devastating. He had always suspected that Vanessa was after their family's money, but to discover that Mark, someone Anna had trusted and loved, had been a willing accomplice all along was a crushing blow. It wasn't just about the affair anymore, it was about a deliberate, long-term scheme that involved betraying both Anna and their father. David quickly realized that Anna's heartbreak had only been part of the story. The real tragedy was that Anna had fallen in love with someone who had been playing both sides. Mark had pretended to care about her, while secretly conspiring with Vanessa to exploit the family. The poison that killed Vanessa had only been the final chapter in a much longer and darker tale of manipulation. David was torn between wanting to protect his sister and confronting the man who had caused so much pain. He realized that Anna had not just been a victim of love, but of a much larger deception. Mark's betrayal was at the heart of everything, and the dark revelation weighed heavily on David. Unable to keep this discovery to himself, David decided to confront Mark. The meeting was tense, filled with accusations and denials, but in the end, Mark couldn't hide the truth. He confessed to his role in Vanessa's plans, though he tried to claim he had been manipulated by her as well. He said that he had initially gone along with it for the money, but over time, he had grown genuinely fond of Anna. However, David couldn't believe anything Mark said anymore. David's confrontation with Mark was the final nail in the coffin of their family's trust. Mark had not only betrayed Anna, but he had also played a part in Vanessa's schemes, turning what should have been a simple affair into a cold, calculated plot. David felt disgusted by the entire situation, realizing that Mark had likely continued the affair with Vanessa even after pretending to commit to Anna. The revelation of Mark's involvement cast a new light on Anna's decision to kill Vanessa. Anna had believed that her stepmother's affair with Mark was the ultimate betrayal. But the truth was far worse. Vanessa and Mark had been using her as a pawn in their game. Anna had unknowingly been part of their plot, blinded by her love for a man who had been deceiving her from the beginning. When David visited Anna in prison to tell her the truth, she was initially numb. Her guilt over killing Vanessa had weighed heavily on her, but learning that she had been manipulated by both Vanessa and Mark left her speechless. In that moment, everything clicked for her: why Vanessa had treated Mark so well, why Mark had lied to her so convincingly. She had been caught in the middle of a cruel game, and her actions, while tragic, were the result of deep betrayal. Anna's emotional breakdown in the prison was inevitable. She had thought that by killing Vanessa, she was freeing herself from the pain of betrayal, but in reality, she had been a pawn in a much darker plot. Her feelings of guilt intensified as she realized that she had been manipulated not just by Vanessa, but by the one person she thought she could trust, Mark. The dark revelation left the family in further disarray. John, bedridden and unaware of the full extent of the deception, remained isolated from the truth. David, now the last standing protector of the family legacy, was left with the difficult decision of how to move forward. The mansion, once a symbol of success, now stood as a reminder of the lies, betrayal, and murder that had torn them apart. Mark disappeared, not legally implicated in Vanessa's death, but pushed away by his guilt and the threat of David exposing his role. No one heard from him again, and he became a bitter memory for both David and Anna. Anna, weighed down by her confession, now understood that she had been manipulated by both her stepmother and her boyfriend. She had acted in a moment of blind love and rage, leading to a tragic outcome that cost her everything. The family's legacy was ruined, and David decided to hide the full truth from their father to protect what little remained of their honor. The mansion, once alive with family memories, became a relic, empty except for John's caretakers, a ghost of its former grandeur. The small town, once buzzing with rumors of the tragedy, slowly moved on. Yet for David and Anna, the scars remained. John's health deteriorated, as he grappled with the loss of Vanessa and the revelation of Anna's crime. He became a shell of his former self, while David managed the family affairs with the constant burden of anger and betrayal. His relationship with Anna became strained, visits to the prison filled with unspoken pain. David struggled to forgive her, though he understood the complex emotions behind her actions. Anna, in prison, faced the harsh reality of her new life, replaying the events in her mind. Therapy helped her confront her emotions, but the guilt and regret lingered. The once strong sibling bond between her and David frayed, with both feeling like strangers. Meanwhile, the town's gossip faded, but the mansion remained a symbol of a family torn apart by secrets. As time passed, John showed small signs of recovery, while David sought counseling to cope with his emotions and the desire to forgive. He slowly found peace in memories of better times and recognized that holding on to anger would only prolong his suffering. Anna, too, found hope in her father's improvement, dreaming of a day when she might be free to reconnect with her family. Both Anna and David, despite the pain, began to see a glimmer of hope for healing and forgiveness. The scars of betrayal would remain, but the belief in redemption and love gave them strength to move forward from the ashes of their broken family.
Please like this video and subscribe the channel and click on bell icon.